Hiya, I'm Sam, and today I wanted to talk about the difference between bipolar disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, because a lot of people seem to get the two quite confused, and I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions. So I feel like the main misconception is about what a personality disorder is. So the best way of describing it is that it is a persistent and rigid set of strategies and behaviors that people use at all times, regardless of the situation and the time period. And what I mean when I say this is that we might all experience some symptoms of narcissism at certain times, in certain phases of our life. So if we're going through a lot of stress at that time period, or in specific situations in our life. So for example, if you are going out clubbing or in the work environment, you might exhibit some of these behaviors, but this won't extend to other areas in your life. So it's not generalized to all areas of your life. So some of these symptoms. So, grandiose sense of self, thinking of yourself as awesome, basically. A sense of thinking that you're entitled, thinking that you deserve everything, wanting authority over people, lying and manipulating in order to get what you want. And, this is very strategic. And, this lying and manipulation is very strategic. It's very proactive. It's them purposely using these techniques to seek something out of the other person. And I'll again describe later about how if these behaviors, do come into bipolar mania, which sometimes they do, it's less about being proactive and it's more about their mind is just so fast with bipolar disorder that they're exhibiting these behaviors without as much conscious control. So yeah, it's very different, but I'll describe that later. So yeah, quickly, to summarize about narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, is this rigid set of strategies which people use in all situations in life. So for example, they're walking down the street, you can tell that they're certainly very, very vain. They have this aura, they're thinking that they're better than you, like lots of different things. And this is consistent across time. So not just like when they're going through a really stressful period in life, it's like years and years of consistent this type of behavior. So that is narcissistic personality disorder. Now to talk a little bit about bipolar disorder. So it is under the category of mood disorders, ranging from highs of mania to lows of depression, and generally having periods where they're stable in terms of mood as well. So to start off with the stable periods, these periods generally are reasonably symptom-free of mental health issues, and in these phases they definitely won't exhibit any symptoms of narcissism. No sense of over grandiose thinking or manipulation or authority. Some people might exhibit some of these symptoms normally to some extent, but it's with the normal variability of humanity in general. Like all of us exhibit some of these symptoms to some extent, but it's no greater in bipolar disorder than in any other disorder. The part of bipolar disorder that people get mixed up between bipolar and narcissism is mania. So I'll describe a bit about mania. And I've experienced bipolar for a few years, and I'm completely controlled now, so I know a reasonable amount about bipolar disorder because I've studied it a lot as well. But the manias, the highs, are actually quite painful if you experience full-blown mania, and you have incredibly high energy levels. You've got racing thoughts. All of this contributes to you not being able to sleep, not being able to eat properly either. And it's painful. It's painful in general. It's quite a horrible experience, to be honest. But some of the subsymptoms which you can get with bipolar mania is that you get delusions or hallucinations. And the most common type of delusion that you get in bipolar mania are grandiose delusions. And these grandiose delusions generally include, they can include things like, I am Jesus returned, like I am the Messiah, I am going to save the world from cancer tomorrow by doing this specific ritual, which will help me to be able to cure cancer for everyone, involving playing a piece on my piano. Like something, it could be something as random as that. I just came up with that on the spot. It shows how my brain works. But those are the sort of grandiose delusions of bipolar disorder. And as you can tell, it's very different to sort of the grandiose philosophies of narcissism. Grandiose philosophies of narcissism are very related to, trying to make themselves feel better themselves than they do. As I said, it's a strategy. With narcissism, it's very much a strategy to help them deal with their life. And it's not to an abnormal level, it is to an abnormal level, but not to a damaging to the self level in a conventional sense. Whereas obviously, like believing that you're Jesus and then realizing that you're not is quite painful. So yeah, that's another huge difference, is that people with bipolar disorder, when they're out of the manic episode, they realize that they're not Jesus. And they realize that, sorry, I shouldn't laugh because it's really painful. I remember it being really painful. But when they go back down, they feel huge amounts of guilt for having felt that high and for the behaviors that they might have exhibited in those in that phase, which might have included a lot of the symptoms that I said. It might not have, but it might have included a lot of the symptoms that I described as narcissistic. But as I said before, not from a proactive angle, not because they're wanting something from other people, not maliciously or strategized, but because their brain is just so hyper that they can't think things through to a full extent. They're sort of acting on impulse, acting without thinking. And as soon as they get out of that, they feel really guilty. So depression is generally very much linked to huge amounts of guilt, which people with narcissistic personality disorder don't feel. They don't have guilt, generally. So yeah, that's another major difference. And as I said before, narcissism is very much to do with, the rigid strategies. So it's consistent throughout time and no matter what's going on externally. And with bipolar disorder, it's internal cues which may trigger a few subsymptoms of narcissism, which are, only part of the big picture. And to be honest, if you look at the big picture, you realize that the reasons why they're exhibiting these symptoms are because they're very, very ill. And they're not meaning to hurt anyone. There's nothing malicious about it. So yeah, that's, I'd say, the main differences between the two disorders. As you can tell, it's very, very different in a lot of ways. And to be honest, as I said before, people sometimes are harsh about people that, experience mania and say that they're narcissistic during that phase. But to be honest, most people in life at some stage or another exhibit some of these symptoms too. And actually, to be honest, with bipolar disorder, at least when they're exhibiting these symptoms, it's because of something external happening and something internal happening, which is far bigger than it, rather than it being used as a strategy. So yeah, that is, that really described. At the same time, I realize it's very hard to deal with someone who is manic in your life. And I feel a lot for people who have been very close in my life who've had to see me during those phases, because I can imagine that it's very hard for them. And I know it is because I've been on the receiving end as well. But please be assured that they're not meaning to be the way that they are at that particular time. And you can be confident that they'll be back to their normal selves. And once they're on medication, This is another huge difference. You can't treat personality disorders with medication, whereas with bipolar you can, because it's a chemical imbalance rather than a set of strategies. So yeah, once they get on the right meds, they'll be all right and it will all be good. I hope with time they'll come out with new forms of therapy that will actually be able to help people with personality disorders, because therapists aren't doing a good enough job at the moment. Definitely not. So that needs to be worked on in future. But yeah, anyway, that's everything that I wanted to say. I hope that I've got across very well the differences between the two, because I feel like it's often confused. And yeah, hope you have a good day. Bye.